Good afternoon, and I want to thank everybody for attending. Both of you, I know it's Sundays are tough, but I really greatly appreciate it. On behalf of Veterans in Politics, we really want to thank you. Before we get started, I just want to recognize our sponsor for today's event is Patsy Brown. She's a candidate for Clark County Public Administrator, and we want to thank her very much for doing that. So just to give you guys a little overview of this process, we'll start by the panel members giving about a 30-second introduction of ourselves. Then you, the candidates, will get 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and why you're asking for our endorsement. Please keep in mind this isn't a debate, so neither one of you can ask each other questions. Once a panel member asks you a question, you'll be given 2 minutes to respond. I won't be rude and interrupt you mid-sentence, but just wrap it up as quickly as possible. And then at the end of the question and answer period, then both of you will be given 3 minutes in order to give a closing statement. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jim Jonas. I'm Director of Veterans of Politics, and I also co-host with Steve Sanson, the President of Veterans of Politics, on our podcast. Frank.
Good afternoon. I'm Frank Friends. I'm a family court advocate, and I'm just involved in local politics. Also a member of my daughter's school PTA. That's about it.
My name is Robert Faust. I'm a third-generation veteran. My father was in World War II. My grandfather was in World War I, and I fought in Vietnam. I came back from the service. I played professional baseball for a little while. I've written 2 books that are now published and available on Amazon.
Okay, so gentleman's agreement, whichever one of you want to start first, and I'm sorry if I didn't clarify, just you can go up to 3 minutes for your introduction if you would like. So whichever one of you want to start first.
First of all, thank you for having us here. I do really appreciate it. My name is Courtney Ketter, and I am running for North Las Vegas Municipal Court Judge Department 2. The reason why I'm running is very simple. I've always been a part of my community. I've been a truancy diversion judge, which is a volunteer position with Clark County. I've done it. I've volunteered to do it at 3 schools that are in what you might say at-risk neighborhoods. I sit on a board for a nonprofit called Bridging the Gap. They work with adults that are suffering with sickle cell. I'm a volunteer basketball coach. I've been a volunteer baseball coach. So working for the community and with community is something I've always done. And being judge is just kind of like the next step in that, if you will. I think I'm the right person for this job because I have the right perspective. I've been a prosecutor and I've been a defense attorney. And I think that's important because with any judge, when you walk into a courtroom, you want to feel like that judge is going to be fair and impartial. You want to feel like no matter what side you're on, when you walk in there, you have a shot to be heard and you have a shot to have justice served, whatever that looks like. And I think because I've been on both sides, I can be fair and impartial, and I can do that. Again, I think my community service kind of speaks for itself, and it's something that I want to continue to do after I get on the bench if I am blessed enough to be elected. You're not going to see me now just while I'm running. You're going to see me afterward because I feel like I can't serve my community if I don't know what my community needs. And that may change from year to year, from cycle to cycle. And so I have to continue to be engaged with my community in order to know what's important to my community. And so you will continue to see me. It's what I do. It's what I believe in. And it's why I'm running.
All right. So my name is Jason Gunnell, and running from North Las Vegas Municipal Court Department 2. And the reason I'm running for judge is that I was fortunate enough to spend 8 years on active duty in the Air Force as an attorney, as a JAG. And then I currently a reservist, 6 years right now as a reservist as a JAG. And then I work as a prosecutor for the state of Nevada. And I've had the opportunity to have a world perspective of the court system. I've tried cases all over the world. I've tried cases all over the state of Nevada, and I've been able to serve the public at the federal level, at the state level. Now I want to get down to the community, and I think it's important because at the community level, you can really make a difference and impact the people one-on-one. And I've had that opportunity to be practiced in a lot of different places and in front of a lot of different judges. And so it's given me a perspective of what I think would be good and bad as a judge in the court system. And one of my big things is I want to, as a veteran, as I've been there as a veteran, I know what it's like. I've separated from active duty, and to support that community and have a veteran voice on the bench. And those are some of the reasons why I'm running for a judge.
Okay, so I do understand this is a little bit of a legislative issue, but it's something that I need to ask both of you because you are both running to be a judge. I know in the state of Nevada, it's state law that judges are elected. And I don't necessarily have an issue with that. However, we also have a process that I really believe is broken in the fact that an incumbent judge very rarely will get an opponent. Either attorneys that have appeared in front of that judge before or for whatever reason don't want to run against that sitting judge because they're afraid that it's going to hurt their business or maybe some future decisions that judge will make. So Veterans in Politics has been very instrumental, and we drafted a bill called Remove or Retain. It died in committee. That's a legislative problem. And basically the way it works is this. So if an incumbent judge runs for re-election, doesn't draw another opponent, then it goes to the ballot as remove or retain. So then citizens can vote whether to remove or retain that judge. If they vote to remove that judge, then that judge has to go back through the appointment process, in which then they're either appointed and recommended to the governor, and then the governor has to decide who takes that seat. Do either one of you think that's a good idea? I'm asking both of you that question. So whichever one wants to start first.
I think it's done in other states, or a process very similar to that is done in other state, retention or removal. I think if you could take a look at the data and how that's affected in other states, and potentially we could modify that and have that here in Nevada, because there is an issue. I would say I didn't realize how much money it costs to run a campaign and the issues with campaigning and the ethical concerns with elections and judges and things like that. So I think there's different systems out there for a reason, and it's worth exploring something like that in the future. So it never hurts to look at it and see if it works better, we can get a better effective product. That's good.
I had never heard of that until now. And I think it is a very interesting idea. I think you're absolutely right. We can tell you just from going through this process, you see judges that aren't opposed. Sometimes they're not opposed because they do a great job and people just feel like they should stay. Sometimes they're not opposed because people know that, okay, maybe they are super funded and backed by other groups and we don't want to piss them off. And that's not the right approach, right? Like that's not the approach that we want. And so I agree. I think we should look into it and look at the data, look at places where it's utilized, and then see if it's feasible here. I guess my initial thoughts are, if that person's removed, then how does that, how quickly can you get them reappointed? And even that could have some issues, because as we know, the appointment process is it's very political, and so depending on who the governor is at the time. You may have them packing the court with, you know, whoever their friends or buddies are. And so, but I think it is a discussion that should be had, because we see it all the time. We do see those candidates that, again, maybe, you know, we all in the community may say, yeah, I wish someone would run against that person, but because of their funding or you know, other reasons, they don't draw that opponent, and that's ultimately what the community shouldn't want. You should want people that are staying on the bench because they've done a great job, not because people know, hey, there may be some retribution or, you know, the funding process, right? As an incumbent, if you raise money, now I can use that money going forward. Whereas, you know, he can tell you just as I can, as someone running for the first time, we're starting from scratch, you know. And if I've got an incumbent who's got, you know, money left over from a previous campaign, they've already got an advantage from you know, a financial standpoint, on top of the fact that they are the incumbent. They've got, you know, advantages that they shouldn't have, quite frankly. And so I think we should look into that.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
So I'd like to ask you both what party you represent and what religion do you hold, and will religion have any factor in your decision?
I am a Democrat. I am a Christian. And I can tell you that neither of those are going to play a factor in how I rule, how I sit on the bench. And the reason is because, quite frankly, the law says so, right? Like at the end of the day, I have to be fair and impartial to everyone that comes in my courtroom, whether they're Christian, Muslim, agnostic, atheist, whatever. And that's what's important. And so, you know, when you walk into my courtroom, I'm not going to have a big cross on the wall. You know, I'm not going to have anything that lets you know any of that, because at the end of the day, my job is to apply the law. Period. All those other things should remain out, and I think that we have kind of gotten away from that in politics in general. I think we've gotten away from just being guided by what's fair and what's just, and there's too many other extraneous things that are guiding people's decisions, and we got to get away from that. And particularly, we have to stay away from that when it comes to the judiciary and judges.
So I am nonpartisan. So I consciously, or I guess independent, I registered Republican to vote for kind of a supporter guy. And before that, I was nonpartisan. I went back, I registered so I could vote for him in a primary, in a general election. And then I purposely went back to be nonpartisan or independent because of those reasons that I feel like a judge, you just need to be independent. And I guess running for a judge, it's also fun too, because you get to go to both events, right? You get to go to the Democratic events, the Republican events, and you get to see all flavors of individuals. And because you need to be non-partial. And I'm also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I'm a Mormon, and I don't. As Courtney said, like, religion doesn't play a factor into the law. I think if you want to like split hairs or something, maybe as any religion or just being a good person, is that you'll treat everybody with like respect and kindness. And, you know, because judges can be jerks on the bench. And I think that's where I get from my religion, is to be nice to people as a judge, and not, I don't know, be mean, I guess, for lack of a better word. So
Municipal Court Department 2 basically does misdemeanors and things like that. And it's really weird because I've done security through all the worst places in Vegas you could ever do it. And I've worked with Safe Village, Bolden Command, a lot of Northtown stuff too. And a family should feel safe at home. But for some reason, we treat home invasions and squatting like it's like, not that big of a deal. It's low on the rung. What would you guys do to maybe look into that? Because it's always multiple. It's never a one-time thing. They are always multiple squatters, multiple home invasions on their record, things like that. And when a family comes home to something like that, it's traumatizing, because the one place you should be safe is the one place that is no longer safe now. And society and our laws just tend to throw those families and those things kind of to the side instead of treating it like, hey, this is done. It ain't happening no more. What would you guys do about that, or where do you see the sentencing on that needs to go? Jason, start with you.
So I think one thing we have right now, but we have laws on the books. It's been a long day. Sorry. That there's Marcy's Law, for example. And Marcy's Law is a protection for victims of crime. And what Marcy's Law actually does is it gives a voice to victims. So in my experience, and it needs to be, if it's enforced more, you have victims will have more of a say in a case like that. So the homeowners, what should happen is they're notified of those hearings that take place. So when that's the law, that's the law. So that's one thing is try to, and that is, it's more of a prosecutor, get the prosecutors to have those victims there and get more involved in the case so they can see the process. And if there goes to sentencing, they actually have a voice at sentencing. So they have input. So you just don't see, defense one side of it. You have both sides of it. So big thing is it's a balance. You have, there's the interest of the government and the city of North Las Vegas. Then you have, there's victims and then the defendant. So that's where the judge, he comes into play, is try to balance on all those factors that come in. Because you could also talk about the defendant and what issues they're, like why are they committing, what's the underlying reason why they're committing the crimes they're committing. And if you can address those, that's another bonus as well.
So I kind of want to, parse that out, your question, because you mentioned home invasion, which is a felony. That's considered a violent crime. So that wouldn't fall under municipal court. That would be more of a justice court thing. So we wouldn't be hearing that. Same with burglary. Someone breaks into your home, you come home, you realize your place has been robbed. That's also a felony. Now, squatting, that is us. Squatting is considered trespassing. And kind of to I guess go off of what Jason said at the end there, I think the best way to address that is through specialty courts. What our specialty courts are, North Las Vegas has one. It's called Care Court. 9 times out of 10, when people are squatting, it's because there's an underlying issue, substance abuse, mental health, or just a lack of resources, right? People are just poor. They don't have anywhere else to go. And so just locking them up doesn't fix their problem, right? If I put them in jail for 30 days, 180 days, when they get back out, they got the same problem they had when they picked up that trespass charge. But if I put them into a specialty court that's going to address whatever that underlying issue is, like I said, mental health. Let's get you some counseling. Let's get you a mentor. Now we can address that so that when you do get done with the program, guess what? You're not going to go back to that residence that you were squatting at and harassing those folks, because now we've set you up to go forth and not have to go backwards. And here's the other thing. Jail's always there, right? So if I send someone over to a specialty court and they fail out, or maybe they were just BSing me, telling me that they were ready and they really weren't, I can always lock them up at that point. But give them the opportunity first to address that underlying issue, because that's how you really keep the community safe, is we address these issues. We know that all criminality isn't because people are just bad people. Sometimes it's just bad circumstances, right? And as a judge, you got to be able to kind of parse those out and separate the actual bad apples from the people who have bad circumstances and address the ones with bad circumstances so that they don't have to continue to do what they're doing.
You brought up an interesting point there. About some bad apples are just bad apples, and some people are just good people, and that goes to DUIs. And I would like to know, number one, the fees for DUI are extremely important. They can ruin your life. They can, and not only that, but I think in the state too, they make you give money to groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving and the supporters of these nonprofit organizations that want to do that. What do you think about that? And would you take steps to alleviate that?
So when you mind if I go first? Go ahead. So with DUI, there are statutory minimums. So now the minimum fine, I believe, is $910, which is a lot of money. You have to pay for the classes, DUI School Victim Impact Panel. So you're talking about $1,000 right there just from classes. On top of, if there's anything additional, random drug testing that a judge may order you to do, you got to pay for that. If you pay for an attorney, I mean, a DUI in Nevada can cost you between $10,000 and $20,000.
But I want to know about being forced to give money to nonprofit organizations that you may not even believe in.
Yeah, no, I'm not for that. Because at the end of the day, that's something that you should be doing out of because you want to, right? Not because you're obligated to. When it comes to the statutory minimums, that's what I'll be looking at. And when it comes to some of those fees, because again, $1,000 is a lot of money for some people. And so, but there are ways that you can address that. You can address that through community service, volunteer work. And so I'll give people that option. If you don't have the ability to pay that, there are other ways that you can satisfy that. Criminal court, I do a lot of family court stuff, CPS stuff. And one of the things we talk about in CPS is change behavior, right? You may not be a bad parent. Maybe you just didn't know things, but you change your behavior. That's what we're looking for. Well, criminal court's kind of the same thing. You want to see people change their behavior. And so if I can have you change what you were doing that got you in front of me in the first place, that's all I care about. The money is whatever. But if I can get you to be a better person, not have any more DUIs, stop squatting, that's the end result. That's the goal that we want. And so I definitely plan to be as creative as the law is going to allow me to be to get people to change where they need to change and get things done.
I agree because it's the legislative. It was almost like a legislative decision. Like they put the mandatory minimums in DUI, and so there's not much you can do. But I think the legislature is concerned about the fact that DUI can have because people can die real easy, and maybe that's where our change in society. If we had more education and things like that, we got to stop people dying from DUIs. And I don't, giving money to your whatever charity organization, I don't know if that's going to necessarily help. But I guess there's only so many tools in a toolbox the legislature will give us, and we have to use those tools and what they can give us. And then there's some leeway where we have to get creative and do certain processes. So.
Nevada hasn't always been just a strict DUI thing. This used to be, you could drive in the car with an open container as long as the driver wasn't drunk. So, that this goes back. It's come over the point of 5 or 10 or 15 years and now it's just like it's a giant problem, and I don't see where it's that much of a problem. To be honest with you.
And that's just a difference of perspective. I have a friend who unfortunately he did kill someone in a DUI, and it was devastating to hit not just the victim's family, obviously, but to his family. And so I definitely understand the problem. Again, the other issue is we're Vegas, right? We're Vegas, baby. There's alcohol available 24/7, and now when you throw in marijuana. It is an issue, but I do think, again, to go back to something I said before, difference between bad people and just people who just had a bad situation. And as a judge, that's where you got to be able to parse that out, and because they do deserve different treatment, quite frankly.
So you guys are talking about mandatory minimums and things like that with sentencing. To me, I think you got to look at it the way it is. And you have judges now. In fact, there's a judge up for Supreme Court right now who is 47.2% of the time goes below the recommended minimum for pedophilia. She goes below it 47.2% of the time. When you guys are seeing things like that and criminals constantly coming back to you with the recidivism rate, at what point do you stop using the minimum and start using you've affected this many victims. It's been this many thousands of dollars. You've done this much to the community. The minimum's not cutting it anymore because they are getting the minimum. And then they're getting right out on bail and turning around and stabbing somebody in the chest or on to their next kid. When do you, as a judge, think that all of that needs to go into consideration to get away from these minimums and start seeing the cases and the person as no longer a circumstance? This is who they are.
And, you know, I'm always a little cautious to criticize other judges because every judge makes decisions, or let me back up. Every judge should be making decisions based on the facts and circumstances presented to them at that time. Mm-hmm. Does that always happen? No. I mean, we know that, right? Like you said, you can look at stats that'll tell us that doesn't happen. And so for me personally, I think that's where you've got to be willing to ruffle some feathers. And I think too often we're not. Not we, but I mean judges. Too often judges aren't, right? If they've got a deal from the state and the defense, all right, I'm going to roll with that, whatever. And you got to be able to say, you know what? I've looked at the facts here, and I'm not comfortable with this. And it's within their discretion, but they don't do it. Mm-hmm. One of the things, as a defense attorney, I tell every single one of my clients, everyone, when I have a plea agreement, this is our agreement, but the judge has the ability to do what they think is fair. Do you understand that? And so it's known. I don't think I'm the only one that does it. I think that everyone does that. And so they know that the judge can always say, you know what, I'm not following this, but most don't. And it's because, again, they don't want to be seen as that judge that's going to ruffle feathers. And they, you know, when they're up for re-election, now they're going to have defense attorneys pissed off and prosecutors pissed off. And I say, at the end of the day, you got to do what you're there to do, and your job is to protect the community. And sometimes that may mean ruffling some feathers, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like Courtney said, facts and circumstances. A lot of dependent on the facts and circumstances of the case. And I've heard tales of people have 100 misdemeanors in North Las Vegas, and so why on earth is there 100 misdemeanors? What is happening? And then you got to ask the question, well, why is there 100 misdemeanors for this one defendant? And why is this defendant in front of me now? Because there's 100 misdemeanors. What can we do to solve this problem? And if it's if it's an underlying mental health problem, let's get them mental health treatment. If that's not the case, then if they're just a jerk or whatever, then that's where you need to lay it down. But you have the fact, it's a facts and circumstances, of each case you're deciding. And one thing that's good for us, fortunate, is that we are in municipal court. And municipal court, the difference between that and say if you're in district court and there's a person with 5 felonies in front of you, there's more consideration, and that's where the judges should be, getting after that more. As opposed to municipal court, we're not going to see as many of those cases where you have a stabbing, and a repeat stabbing cases or things like that, where there's violent crimes that are felony offenses and the repeat offender. There's a certain point where you just got to, say enough is enough there. But I think that applies more in district court is what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep people out of district court. That's our goal, Oh, go.
Okay. All right. So this is kind of a loaded question, but I want both of you, because here's the thing that frustrates me about this whole process, and it has nothing to do with you two gentlemen. It's just the things that have occurred. So so in North Las Vegas, do you guys have a legislative liaison that works with the legislature? Either one of you can answer.
Do you mean the court or like us individually? Do we know people that we can kind of?
No, the court in general.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So here's the reason why I'm asking that question, because we have three branches of government in this country. And I have, for the life of me, do not understand why the legislature ties judges' hands as much as they do. Right? So the legislative branch and the judicial branch have become so intertwined at this point where as a judge, when you're basically said, okay, you're basically told by the legislature, okay, so first offense DUI, this is what it is. These are your parameters. Second offense DUI, these are your parameters. Or other cases as well. I'm just wondering, like, if either one of you get elected, if you'd be willing to push for that, because I think we really need to get back to judges being judges, legislators being legislators, and the executive branch being the executive branch. You want to go first, Jason?
Sure. So that is a loaded question, and I
More of an opinion.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Because well, I always think of the ethical concerns. And judiciary canons, we have to follow the judiciary canons. And there's some, it's just a separation of powers thing. And you would say it is weird because in the federal system, judges are not elected, they're appointed. So it makes even more sense that your elected officials in the federal system pass the laws and the judges follow the laws that are passed. Where in Nevada, where we're elected judges, it kind of, I don't know. It's just a little different, but I think the role that the way the two can work together, and it's a little different too because the city council, because we'll work for the city of North Las Vegas, is to seek out the city to get some alternative methods, alternative means put into place, and to work within the system, the confines that we're giving, there is latitude, and try to see if we can explore some of those things. I think outside the box a little more, because there are ways you can, and I'm thinking more in other cases like felony cases. There's certain circumstances where you can plead them down where there's not mandatory minimums. Like in the olden days, trafficking was if you had pretty low levels of methamphetamine, you could get life in prison. And what we would do as prosecutors, we'd say there's a transporting, which is essentially the same, but it doesn't have the mandatory minimum. So you're able to negotiate, you're able to work within the confines and charge things or do things a little different. So there is a little leeway there. And I think that's where it's important that everybody be able to work together is probably more important than anything, and if you can, because we all have the same goal. We all want society to be better. Nobody wants us to fail, or, everybody's trying, we're all in this together. Defense counsel, prosecutors, police officers, judges, everybody, the families, everybody wants to see the best result possible. So that's one way to try to work together.
And to kind of piggyback off of what he just said at the end there, I think there should be more collaboration between the two, right? Because, part of the issue is the legislative body, you don't necessarily have to be an attorney, right? It helps, but you don't have to be. And so you may have people that are, putting forth bills and things that don't have that legal background. And so, they're putting forth bills that we then have to, like he said, work within the confines of and interpret and apply if you're a judge. And so you may have a certain intent when you wrote this bill, but the way it may actually be playing out may be different. And that's where you need that communication. That's where you need that collaborative effort to say, hey, listen, maybe this tweak, maybe that tweak would get the result that you're actually looking for. Or maybe you just need to completely scrap it and start from scratch because, for us, it's not working. I think you definitely do need that collaboration. Because what happens is what you see now, right? When there are holes in the law, there's finger pointing. Judges say, well, listen, I'm applying the law that the legislators wrote. And the legislators saying, well, the judges are the ones that are doing X, Y, and Z. And that's the problem that you then have. And then nothing gets done, right? Because there's finger pointing, but there's nothing actually done to address whatever the hole is. If you're working together, then you can't have finger pointing. It's either, okay, oops, we messed up, we need to go back and do it again, or we're already working on it. We've had communication. We know where the mistakes are. We're going to tighten it up.
So, well, you guys, I forgot what I'd say.
So, I guess this isn't really your guys' department, but I just kind of want to know a couple of things about you guys as candidates. Are you pro 2A, anti 2A, for mandatory gun buybacks, against them? Where do you stand on that situation, since those cases will come to you as a judge at some point?
So I'm definitely pro Second Amendment. I own guns. I own weapons. I'm not ex-military, but I got couple of best friends that are, and so we love to go out and shoot, and I think it is a good thing. It's one of those things that unfortunately, and this happens sometimes. You've got the extreme cases that then reflect negatively on all gun owners, right? And we've got to figure out a way to kind of fix that. But I definitely don't think restricting all gun ownership is the answer. There's questions about high-powered rifles. I think some of those questions are valid, but I think if you're someone who's who says that you're completely anti-2A, that's your opinion. It's not, again, it's not mine. But I think you should be a responsible gun owner. I think that comes into place, and something that, again, that always bothers me. I'm not, I work in family court as a defendant for parents that have had their children removed. When I see cases where, there's loaded weapons that are in the reach of children, that's super concerning. And I think if you're going to own a gun, that's rule number one, right? You got to be a responsible gun owner. And so I think that we do need more education for gun owners. We also need more background checks for people that have mental health issues in their past. Because that's oftentimes where you see issues arise. But I think, again, that's not something that speaks to the majority of gun owners. I think the majority of gun owners are responsible, but unfortunately, when you have those cases that make national news, they get blown into a proportion like, oh, this is why it's such a bad thing, and that's not the case. We just got to be able to address those specific issues that may have been an issue in that case, and then we'll be okay.
So I'm just a pro rights in general person, like all rights, like second, first, like fourth, 15, and I just, because you look at the fourth, like privacy or the First Amendment, and I just don't like when people's rights are taken from them. And I was talking to he calls him Donald Green. He calls himself the gun lawyer. And he talked about how he tries to get people's guns rights back. And if you've got been arrested and you go to buy a weapon, you got arrested for something 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you go buy a gun and you do the federal background check, some people are denied because of that, and they can't even find the original record. So I think there has to be balance in everything, but you're not, there's certain individuals who shouldn't have guns, but it's not we shouldn't have a blanket thing.
With the pandemic that we've just had, the COVID-19, I think it's been blown highly out of proportion. I'm sure that people in the government have made money off of it with pharmacies and injections and such. But a lot of the courts were closed, and you might have got a ticket and you had a fine or something, and maybe you went to pay that fine, and they wouldn't even take the money because the place was closed. So what do you say to those people that they could have warrants out right now?
So I think that's one thing that why I'm running in North Las Vegas Municipal Court. And Courtney alluded to the CARES Court, and they're doing sessions, they're warrant quashing sessions, and so they're getting rid of those old warrants, and there's because they're a backlog. And this is one thing: if somebody gets a traffic ticket and has a warrant out for their arrest, and a police officer has to pull them over, you can ask a police officer this. They do not want to arrest this person because it takes them off the street, and somebody could be committing a felony or another crime, and they have to take them in and book them. So they're trying to North Las Vegas is trying to address that issue and make it so somebody who has a warrant that's been outstanding for a long time, for whatever reason, they can get it taken care of. And I know during the pandemic, all those cases were stayed too. You couldn't get in trouble if you had an outstanding ticket. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. I can't tell you how many friends I had that said, "Hey, I got this ticket. Can you help me take care of it?" And I tried, and I couldn't do anything with it. And so I think what needs to happen is, they shouldn't be issuing warrants. Period. Issue a summons. Mail something out, says, "Hey, here's your court date." Give people the opportunity to come in and address it. If a warrant has been issued, then you have to have warrant quashing events to take care of that. You can't allow people to be arrested for something that, quite frankly, that they couldn't take care of. That's not their fault.
Or they tried to take care of it, and the place was closed.
Right.
But they've got a collection bureau now for the tickets, for the traffic tickets, and the correction bureau just adds 5 or 10% every month.
Yeah, and again, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen.
They should be told to stop.
Right.
So this will be the last question. There's a lot of stupid misdemeanor laws in the state of Nevada, just weird ones. Yes, most of the time they're not enforced, but interrupting the flight of a pigeon, defacing a hamburger, using profanity in front of a corpse are actually arrestable offenses. As a judge, how do you feel about getting a lot of these, not only repeat laws, but just ignorant laws completely off the books so that your common citizen wouldn't need to know those things like I know them because I've seen people charged with them. You know what I mean? That's the only reason I know they exist is I've seen it happen. Blocking a pedestrian pathway, 3 or more people standing on a sidewalk. It's arrestable. What would you do about getting these things that are basically a waste of your time, taxpayer money, and a waste of the officer's time to even write this? What would you do about it?
So that goes back to what I said earlier, right? Where judges have that discretion. And I think one of the things that you do, and Jason can tell you this, there's a process for a case to get to a judge. It has to, ticket gets written, and then it gets referred to the prosecutorial office. That office screens it, and that office says, okay, yes, we're going to go forward with this, or no, we're going to deny it. And then it gets in front of a judge. As a judge, when you're seeing those things, and like I said earlier, you have to always be wearing fairness and justice. And if I have some of these things that, in my opinion, aren't really worth it, then I'm just gonna dismiss it, and you have that discretion. Now, again, it always goes back to the facts, right? I'm gonna always look at the facts of the case and see, okay, why are we here? Because maybe there is a reason why the city decided to go forward with it. And so once I look at that, and if I determine, what, I think fairness and justice dictates that I dismiss this, then I'm not gonna be afraid to do that. But again, like I said before, you got to look at why it came before you. And I think what happens is once you as a judge kind of establish what's your threshold with that prosecutorial office, then they'll catch on and they'll say, okay, we've got a, impeding the flight of a pigeon case. We know Judge Ketter doesn't entertain those, we're going to deny it. You know what I mean? So I think that's how you kind of have to establish yourself. You've got to set the tone and say, this is my threshold. This is how I'm going to handle things, and then go from there. But again, it's always going to be based on the facts and circumstances that are presented to you.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing too, that law enforcement. When you have people committing felonies and other crimes that are serious crimes or different types of crimes, why are you worrying about these cases? Why are these cases coming? And trying to, like Courtney said, establishing your like, this is the threshold. Like, this isn't a case worth taking. And as a prosecutor, I do that. We do that. Like, we do that all the time. We're like, why are you bringing me this case? And the judges, that's another thing. Like in Clark County, there's cases that the judges here will not hear, but when I'm out in the rules, they'll actually hear it because they have more time. There's not as many cases, and so they'll take cases different. They see different cases differently, and it's a different community too. So it all depends on the communities you're in. But yeah, like there's rarely cases like like our office right now. If it's not a violent offense, I'm not asking for an arrest warrant. I'm going to have an ask for a summons in a case because it's just not worth it. And the judges they're just going to release that person if it's not a violent crime. So.
And one more thing to that point, I think the underlying issue that sometimes happens with some of these really, really minor offenses is overcharging, right? You've got a cop who now you've pissed him off, and so he's going to ring you up for every single thing that he can. And again, that's where as a judge you've got to establish yourself. If you see a pattern of that and say, okay, listen, I'm this is a problem, and this is how I'm going to handle it. And because again, we know what happens, we see it.
Okay. First off, I just want to thank both of you. It's a really hard thing to run for judge, especially because, to be quite frank, Steve Sanson has spearheaded this for a long time with me, and I'm still learning. But a lot of people don't understand what the difference is between what a municipal court judge can do and cannot do, and district court and the appellate court and the Supreme Court. But judges impact your life immediately. And municipal court is literally the people's court. So I want to thank you both very much for coming in. Right now, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start with Jason. I'll give each one of you 2 minutes to just give any final words you want. But I'm going to have to hold both of you gentlemen exactly to 2 minutes because we are running close on time. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I like what you said, James, is the people's court. And why I'm running for municipal court as opposed to any court is because I want to be with the people. I always consider myself a blue collar attorney. I'm not into highfalutin, legal arguments, and I like the interaction with the public. And people are going to, as a municipal court judge, you are going to interact with the public more than any other level. And it's important that people come out of there, even if there's a judgment against them, that they feel like they were treated with respect and fairly. And we as a society, democracy is a razor thin edge. Ask the Romans what happened to them. It doesn't take much to destabilize what we have in this country, and we have to have that. We have to have that integrity in the system, and that this is my personality. This is who I am. And that is the reason why I'm running for municipal court judge.
Okay, real quick, you got a couple seconds. Do you want to give a point of contact or anything? And then you'll also be given the same opportunity, Courtney.
Sure. So my website is www.gunnell4judge, the number 4, and then judge.com. So www.gunnell4judge.com.
Thank you, Courtney.
I want to thank you guys for having me. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a veteran, but I have some people very close to me that are veterans. And one of the things that is super important to me is specialty courts. And I really want to really bolster the care court that North Las Vegas has. And I have experience working with specialty courts. Like I said, when I was at family court, I literally used to walk some of my parents to drug court, introduced them to Judge Sullivan, introduced them to the drug court coordinators. When I worked as a prosecutor in the city of Las Vegas, I routinely sat in with the veterans court sessions, the drug court sessions, the hope court sessions, the mental health court sessions. I've seen how those opportunities, because that's what it's about. It's about giving people the opportunities, how those opportunities have impacted people. When you go on my website at www.CKETTER4judge.com, you'll see 3 words that are highlighted. Consistency, because I will consistently be fair and balanced. I don't care who you are. In my practice, I've had family court clients that are worth $20 million. And in my criminal court, I've had, homeless people that are schizophrenic, and I've treated them both the same with respect and dignity. And I'm going to do that when I'm in the court. Compassion. That's the next thing that you're going to see highlighted. I think in this time, people need compassion. We're just coming off a pandemic. And we're still kind of dealing with that, right? People, and especially the hardworking people, they're still dealing with that. They need some compassion. And then courage. That's going to be the third C you're going to see on my website. Why courage? Because like I said earlier, you have to be willing as a judge to do the right thing, no matter who it may piss off, no matter who won't like it. Because at the end of the day, that's why you're there. I say that every elected person is a public servant. We've gotten away from that. You're not a king. You're not a queen. You're a public servant. And if you're not going to be that, you should be voted out. Period.
Okay, I want to thank both of you very much for coming in. This will conclude our endorsement interview for North Las Vegas Municipal Court Department number 2. Thank you.